How can a wine story rooted in darkness leave you feeling hopeful about life? Why is France such a symbol of freedom, possibility, and reinvention? And how can discovering France through art, cinema, and wine become an escape into a completely different world? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in our chat with Namratha Stanley, who will be publishing her debut memoir, Vineyard Melody, on February 10th. It's the wine version of Eat, Pray, Love, and you can pre-order it now online. By the end of our conversation, you'll also discover the childhood moments that shaped Nam's sense of courage, adventure, and understanding of justice, why Nam felt compelled to write this book despite the risks of her telling the truth, how the system failed to protect her, and how learning French became an act of survival, why the language proved so valuable when an unexpected job opportunity in Paris arose, what it was like to arrive in Bordeaux and to enroll in the Wine MBA, and what seeing the Eiffel Tower for the first time and having a first meal in Paris felt like and symbolized for her. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 372. We're kicking off a mid-January stretch that is surprisingly packed with reasons to celebrate, even if you're trying to keep things dry or damp. As of this morning, the landscape for Ontario drinkers has fundamentally changed. We're 2 weeks into the open market era, and the latest data shows that retailers are wasting no time. A new regulatory amendment took effect on New Year's, allowing grocery and convenience stores to sell alcohol online right beside your milk and your bread, removing the old requirements. Recent BMO wine market stats indicate that 70% of Canadian wineries expect sales growth this year. George Saleas, president and CEO of the LCBO, will retire on January 31st. After nearly 30 years with the organization and the last decade at the helm as CEO. The LCBO is second only to Costco in terms of being the largest purchaser of beverage alcohol in the world. Saleas joined the LCBO in 1997 as a quality assurance inspector, rose to executive VP, and then went on to be CEO for 10 years. His successor, Aaron Campbell, currently Chief of Staff and VP of Corporate Affairs, Strategy and Sustainability, will step in as interim president and CEO on February 1st. I'm sure there's going to be lots more changes coming as a result. Saleas exits at a time that's pretty turbulent for the LCBO in terms of navigating new competition from convenience stores and grocery stores, U.S. tariffs, product delistings. Over 3,600 American brands remain unavailable, and the ongoing shift toward moderation among consumers. January is shaping up to be a record-breaking one for dry January. 41% of Canadian consumers are fully participating or reducing their alcohol intake this month, with interest having surged 242% since tracking began. In the U.S., 30% are joining dry January, which is also a big jump, and Gen Z continues to lead the charge. The marketing world is split between the dry and damp camps. This year's strategies have pivoted away from the don't drink now lectures toward the drink better empowerment. Seedlip, Diageo's pioneering alcohol-free spirit brand, is celebrating its 10th anniversary this month with the launch of its cheeky "Yeah, It's a Drink" campaign, directly addressing skeptics who still question whether non-alcoholic spirits count as real drinks. And by the way, my personal opinion is absolutely. These taste great. When you get good brands in the spirits or wine categories, you're getting something that actually tastes good. Yes, it doesn't have alcohol, or it may be low alcohol, and there's a trade-off with that in terms of the body and weight. Alcohol is also a carrier of flavor, but these new drinks that are coming on the market now are pretty darn good. That's why I'll be doing a special segment on low and no alcohol drinks on City TV's Breakfast Television this month. London and Paris bars are now serving luxury sips, 1-ounce pours of premium wines at $15 to $20, giving budget-conscious drinkers a taste of the good stuff without committing to a full bottle or a full glass even. That's appealing apparently to Ozempic and other GLP-1 users who have reduced appetites and thirst for wine. If you're looking for a reason to pour something specific this week, the calendar is working overtime. January 14th is National Pastrami Day. Skip the soda and try a bold, peppery Syrah or a tangy craft cider to cut through that salty smoked fat and all the nitrates that can cause cancer. Anyway, all things in moderation, right? January 16th, it's International Hot and Spicy Food Day. Celebrate by making a spicy margarita or a marg with a bird's eye chili. Or for trivia buffs, remember that spicy food releases the same endorphins as runner's high, making it the perfect legal buzz. We also have National Hot Buttered Rum Day on January 17th, a great excuse to warm up with this colonial classic featuring dark rum, butter, brown sugar, and warming spices. Mix yours with a splash of Newfoundland Screech and toast to surviving the polar vortex. January 18th doubles as Gourmet Coffee Day and Peking Duck Day. May I suggest pairing a crispy duck with an off-dry Alsatian Gewürztraminer while sipping on a coffee-infused Kahlua digestif afterward. Baltic Porter Day rolls in on January 18th. Why not try pairing this dark, roasty beer with smoked cheddar or even a chocolate lava cake? This once niche style that crossed the Baltic Sea centuries ago, where British porters were beefed up to survive long, chilly voyages, ended up inspiring local brewers to create the inky, high-gravity versions that taste like liquid rye bread soaked in cocoa. January 19th is National Popcorn Day. Try the buttered kernels with a creamy Chardonnay. Jan 20th is both Butter Crunch Day and Cheese Lovers Day, which practically begs for a cheese board paired with a buttery Chardonnay or a nutty aged Gouda alongside a tawny port. In marketing moves this week, we're seeing a major shift in how brands talk to us on social media. The era of the polished celebrity spokesperson apparently is being replaced with what marketers called authentic entry points. How do they manage to make simple things sound complex? Maybe it's justification for their salaries. Anyway, brands like Curtis Family Vineyards are now using augmented reality-enabled labels where a quick smartphone scan doesn't just show you a tasting note, but drops you into a live 360-degree behind-the-scenes feed of their sustainable water management systems, which just sounds profoundly boring, but I'm sure as we get used to using this technology more effectively, we'll get into a little bit more excitement. All right, I'm sure some people do find water management very exciting, and I'll be hearing from them. The Wine Dogs 2026 calendar has officially launched, featuring loyal dish liquors from famous wine estates. It's the ultimate possum accessory for any tasting room wall this year, as well as lovers of both wine and her, what do they call it, canine friends. As you can tell, I'm not a fur mama. A new record was recently set for the world's largest alcoholic mixed drink, using a staggering 2,650 bottles of Jose Huero Gold. The resulting margarita could have served 134,000 people. That is, if they could have found a straw large enough. In the records you shouldn't try at home category, a Polish mixologist recently claimed the title for the largest gin and tonic, mixing over 500 liters of gin with 1,700 liters of tonic. Now that's enough G&T to fill a decent-sized garden pond. Archaeological chemists have confirmed that wine actually predates the wheel. I knew it. While the wheel showed up around 3500 BCE, evidence of fermented honey mead in China dates back to 9,000 years, proving that humans prioritized a good drink over easy transportation. That's probably why Air Canada is making alcoholic drinks free on board. I mean, who cares where my luggage went? Give me another Merlot. And the world's most expensive bottle of scotch, a Macallan 1926, continues to haunt auctions with a $2.7 million, that's US dollars, price tag. Only 40 bottles exist, so it's almost too precious to actually open. And a thief in Guelph, Ontario, with very expensive taste and very poor morals stole a 70-year-old woman's debit and Visa card information in late November, and then used the cards to withdraw $3,500 in cash and purchase 2 bottles of Chateau Margaux from the LCBO, valued at $4,200. Chateau Margaux is one of only 5 Bordeaux estates awarded first growth status in the 1855 classification. And the thief choosing 2 bottles of Margaux over, say, grabbing a bunch of mid-range bottles suggests either genuine wine knowledge or very good advice. Either way, this is a thief with grand ambitions and, again, no sense of right and wrong. And here's a weird but wonderful scientific fact. If you're watching your sugar and using diet mixers in your cocktails, you might be getting tipsy faster. A study found that people who use artificially sweetened mixers like diet soda have significantly higher breath alcohol readings than those who use regular mixers. The sugar in regular soda actually slows down the rate at which your stomach empties its contents into the small intestine, which is where most alcohol is absorbed. Without that sugar break, the alcohol hits your bloodstream at high speed. I'm sharing more weird tips and sips over on Instagram at Natalie McLean Wine, so join me over there for more of that. And back to today's episode. 3 of you will win a copy of Nam's new memoir. If you'd like to win, just email me and let me know, hey, I'd like to win. It doesn't matter where you live, I'll choose 3 winners randomly from those who contact me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. Keep them for yourself or give them as gifts. Congratulations to Agnes Ginteri in Latvia, who has won a copy of the Smart Traveler's Wine Guide to the Rhone Valley by Matt Walls. Thank you so much for listening, Agnes. On upcoming TV shows, we'll be talking about fresh spring wines in March, St. Patrick's Day wine, beerits. Now there's a new word, eh? Beer and spirits, and environmentally sustainable drinks for Earth Hour, Easter, and Mother's Day. Let me know if you'd like your brand featured on these TV segments or future ones, or if you'd like to advertise with us through our podcast, newsletter, website, social media, or mobile apps. Please email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. If you're reading the paperback or ebook or listening to the audiobook of my memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, which I can now say at warp speed, which is a national bestseller and one of Amazon's best books of the year, I'd also love to hear from you. Good things only, please. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/372. Okie dokie, on with the show. Before I introduce our guest, just let me say that 3 of you are going to win a copy of her terrific new book. It's called Vineyard Melody. All you have to do is email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and let me know you'd like to win a copy. I'll pick 3 people randomly from those who contact me. All right, back to our guest. Namratha Stanley has just published her debut memoir, Vineyard Melody, a soul-stirring memoir that traces Nam's journey from the darkness of domestic violence in India to the sun-drenched vineyards of France, where she reinvents herself to become a wine entrepreneur. She explores domestic and cultural tensions, the challenges of motherhood, and of becoming the person she was meant to be, all the while finding healing in winemaking, storytelling, and travel. Vineyard Melody offers a message of hope, resilience, and rebirth, especially for women rebuilding lives on their own terms. She joins me now from her home in Bordeaux, France. Nam, we're so glad you could join us. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be on your podcast, Natalie, and thank you for having me as your guest.
Absolutely. Well, when you reached out to me and you told me just in a short couple paragraphs your story, it was just so compelling. had to talk to you. But before we dive into your wine career, tell us about the time when you and your sister, when you were children, you apparently took off to see a blind lioness called Sheba at a veterinarian doctor's home in Bangalore. So, what gave you this idea? Like, how far was it? Tell us about that that experience.
That's a very funny experience. And this was around the time I was in ninth grade. And my sister, she loved animals and she still loves animals. We are a family of people who love animals. And she came to me one Saturday afternoon and said, I know this person who has this lioness in the house. He's rescued the lioness. She's partially blind, and it would be nice to go and see her. And she didn't tell me it was a lioness, the full grown lioness. She told me she was a cub. So I was so excited, and I was always adventurous. So she asked me if I could take her there, and I had this little motorbike. So I took her there. And when the veterinarian, he opened the door and we got in, I saw this huge lioness, full grown lioness, sitting on the floor of a medium sized house, living room. And I was so scared. But my sister, she was so brave. She sat down on the floor and she was petting the lioness like a dog and playing with her like a dog. And yes, she was partially blind and she was rescued by the doctor and was getting rehabilitated. But it took time. So he had her in the house and he was very kind enough to welcome us. But I had made a pact with my sister that we wouldn't tell our parents about it. So we petted her. I just patted her on her head and went back home that night feeling extremely excited about this whole experience. We did eventually tell my mother, but not my father, because my father was a little strict. But my mother got to know.
What did your mother say?
She was shocked and she said, never do this again without me.
Because that was a lioness from the wild. It hadn't grown up domesticated, right?
No, she was from the wild, but she was partially blind, so she was in need of care.
Right. So, oh my gosh. Yeah, your sister sounds like a real character. Real sense of adventure there early on between the two of you.
Absolutely.
Now, you have another childhood memory that's more disturbing, but again, had a profound impact on you. Tell us about when you were with a cousin on the beach, what happened and what that meant to you.
Oh, yeah, this is a little more bleak. Unfortunately, this memory has stayed with me. I think I'm going to take it to the grave, mostly because it's so profound. This was when I was 8 years old. I was on the beaches of Pondicherry with my uncle and aunt and my cousins. We were there on a holiday. I was there along with my sister again. As every beautiful day, we were enjoying the sea in the evening, and my cousin was standing near the shore. I remember it was dusk, it was getting a little dark, and my cousin was standing near the shore and he was waving at me, and I ran to him thinking, he must have found something, probably a treasure. And I go to him and I see this lovely face of a doll shining in the moonlight. And I pick her up and I drop her instantly. I was shocked because it was not a doll, it was a baby girl. I could see the umbilical cord, the clip on the umbilical cord, and it sank into me that, the gravity of the situation. And I looked at my cousin, we both were shocked. And, that memory stayed with me. It's basically in India at that time, female infanticide was so rampant and sex selective abortions was rampant. They've changed the laws. It still exists in little pockets across India. But that memory has made me really change my perspective about life and to navigate patriarchy, misogyny, and a whole lot of things that a girl as she grows up and a woman as we navigate life that we have to face. And when I was stuck in a difficult marriage, things like that changed a lot of who I was to become the woman I am today.
And it also impacted you. We'll get to this, but the charitable drives and organizations that you support today, the education of women, and of girls, and some of the other things you do. So really, it had a lifelong impact, I can imagine. You will remember that one forever. All right. So let's talk about your book, which, is as described, full of light and darkness, but in the end, it's a happy story. Spoiler alert. But tell us in a nutshell what this book is about and what makes it different from other books that may be similar. Because there's kind of a genre of people finding themselves in the wine industry, from pewter mills, year in Provence to all kinds of things under the Tuscan sun. But tell us about your book again in a nutshell.
I think, Natalie, a lot of people, like you said, have written stories of survival, grief. They've written beautiful stories about Vineyard, and I think mine is an amalgamation of all of these stories because there's darkness and then you go into light. There's always hope in the story. When you read the story, you'll go from feeling terrible to cheering for me and feeling, you want me to come out of this situation as a winner. And that's what happens. So it's Eat, Pray, Love. It's from scratch. It is a year in Provence. It's all put together. And the book is about that. It is going to give hope to a lot of people who think life is just, you cannot go on further. But they will see that when I thought life will not go on further, but when I took that first step, that life could go on further and you could discover beautiful things. Your life can become whatever you dreamed of.
Well, you don't have a copy of the book because it's not quite yet published. And by the way, pre-orders are really important. If you're listening, please pre-order the book. It's Vineyard Melody on Amazon or wherever you shop. But you sort of have a copy of the book. Maybe show that. For those who are watching the video, you'll see the cover of this book. I'll put a picture in the show notes. There it is. But how did you create this book? Because you don't have the published book yet. What's underneath?
You're absolutely right. I'm still waiting to get my copy of the book. But what I've done is because, time is running out and publication date is 10th of February. So I needed some pictures for social media. So what I did was I printed a sheet and I stuck it on Eat, Pray, Love.
The book cover, on the top of Eat, Pray, Love. I think that's good luck omen. Everyone must be familiar with Eat, Pray, Love. And that, of course, is another journey of a woman who finds herself, this time through food, prayer, and love. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's great. So February 10th, but pre-orders are really important. They tell Amazon and any other book retailer, wherever you live, that this book is going to sell well if there's a lot of pre-orders. So that's important. And we'll put a link in the show notes. So what specific moment convinced you that this story had to be written rather than just living out? I mean, you came through it, you did the work, did the healing, but why did you want to write about it? Especially because you have a lot of relatives in this book, and they're not all portrayed in the most positive light, truthfully, from your perspective, I know, but that could be tough. So what convinced you had to write it?
Memoirs are difficult to write, Natalie, like you know. And I think somewhere between, I think it was about the late 2019, I was sitting and replaying my life in my head, and I was thinking, oh my God, I have this wonderful brand. And I was thinking from being a housewife to being abused to, moving to France and to having all these wonderful adventures in France. And I'm thinking, and that's when I realized, oh my God, this could be a book and this could be a film. And I said, maybe I could start writing and, thinking about writing actually. Mm-hmm. So I was charting this in my head, but also memoirs are very hard to write because they are real characters, they are real people, they're real incidents. And, anything you say you can have a backlash. But as an author of a memoir, you always have to be courageous and to tell the truth. And once you have the truth backing you up, nothing's going to trouble you. And I've changed the names of the characters, the identifying details. I mean, it's usually what happens when you write the memoir. So I have done all of that. And I think that, people who have done good in my life and been there for me, or, that's great. And people who haven't been there and who've harmed me in different ways, they know who they are. And it's always it always reflects back on them. This is not a revenge story. It is
Mm-hmm.
telling the story from my point of view, from my perspective, and that
Sure.
could be something different from the other person's perspective.
Yeah, they can write their own memoir.
Yeah.
One memoir said, for the people who complain, I didn't come off very well in your memoir. She said, well, you should have treated me better if you wanted to come off better. Anyway, what was the most surprising insight you discovered while writing the book, Nam?
I think while writing the book, I felt this inner voice that kept telling me, write. And as and when I was writing, I felt courage. I felt that the story could inspire a lot of people. And I felt that this is very cinematic. I discovered that I could write, a writer as a
Oh, the
writer.
surprise was that you could actually write. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, because I was
Yeah.
not a writer. I'm a debut writer, and the first three chapters were really, really hard to write, and I kept it away. And I said, nobody's going to read this. But then I took it back and I said, there was some voice in me saying, write, the world needs this book. So I kept writing after. And then it was a flow.
Yeah, that's great when you hit that flow state and things get easier. The words
Yeah.
seem to come more easily. So let's go into your story. Now, you met your husband, Moksh, at a family event in Bangalore, and you fell in love with, quote, his bewitching smile and charming ways. What were the early signs that you missed or chose to ignore? Because later those darker patterns of abuse did emerge.
Absolutely. I think that when we had a courtship period, so I hadn't seen any kind of signs, red flags as such. We were a perfect couple. A lot of people envied us. Now, going into marriage, what I realized was I didn't have that time where I actually lived with him. We were meeting outside, we were meeting friends, we were going out, but I didn't have that time period where I actually lived with him and his family and saw what it was to live in the family. So
Right.
everything was based on just love, love, and love, but the reality was completely different. So I wish there was that transition period that
Right.
and in India, live-in relationships are frowned upon. So I feel that if I had that, then maybe I would have changed my mind. Maybe I would have seen the red flags much more closely.
Sure. Yeah, courtship is the fun part. But your father-in-law told you directly, allowing women of the house to work shows that we're weak and incapable of taking care of the vulnerable. That's culturally ingrained, obviously. But then you landed a job as a junior chef, and your family and your husband demanded you give it up. Can you describe that conversation? What happened, and how you? I think at that point you weren't married yet, but so you had to choose between a career and marrying the man that you loved at that time.
Yeah, I think it was a really difficult situation to be in because on one hand you love this person, and the other hand you have to give up your whole career. And when my father-in-law told me that we women are vulnerable and it's a s it's not in them to let a woman go out and work, I was pretty shocked because I came from a family who did believe in working women. My mother, of course, never worked, but my father always encouraged me and my sister to work. And a lot of people in my family did work. So when I was facing this situation, I was thinking to myself, I can ride a bike, I can make patisserie, I can do a whole lot of things. I was modeling also at that time. I was earning a little bit of money at that time. I'm capable of a lot of things. And I had to give up not only the job, but the modeling career. I had to give up literally everything. So it was very
Wow.
upsetting, but I didn't want to upset them. I was in this very tight situation. I did protest, but I didn't want to cause a scene.
That must have been tough, because you describe your initial marriage as, quote, being trapped in a golden cage where each feather was slowly clipped from my wings. Wow. Your mother-in-law told you, listen to me carefully. After you marry, we will be responsible for your safety and well-being. It is not in our culture tradition to let women go out and earn. Tell us an example that might illustrate this is when you wanted to go visit your family, and I guess you are now married. What happened?
I was completely taken aback because my mother-in-law told me that if you need to go and visit your parents, you have to ask your father-in-law's permission. And for me, that was total control.
Mm.
And I realized at that point of time the extent of leverage that I had given to them by giving up my financial freedom. So I protested, of course, and I was stuck again in the situation where I had to convince them, but they were not getting convinced. Then I had to convince my husband, Moksh, at that time, where he understood to a certain extent, but he wanted to please his parents, so he didn't have a voice. And I felt disturbed. I felt like my whole life was going sinking into an abyss. And I did, of course, protest. And, at certain point, they realized that I'm drawing the line there, that I want to
Mm.
see my parents and I'm going to see my parents, even if I'm going to give up this relationship. So I think they stopped at that time.
They backed off a little bit. But then
Yeah.
there's a harrowing scene where your husband grabs you by the neck and threatens you, quote, I'll break every bone in your body if you ever try to humiliate me or my family. So what gave you the courage that night to call the police?
It still sends shivers down my spine that night.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine.
yeah. I was well into the marriage. I had a 2-year-old child at that time, and there was that evening a lot of abuse that had happened, and I was very scared. But I told myself if I wouldn't do anything, if I wouldn't react, then this is going to continue. I needed somebody to warn him, to draw a line and say, hey, this is not okay. Physical abuse and mental abuse, emotional abuse is not okay. And I wanted to give the message and I wanted protection.
Mm.
But unfortunately, I didn't have enough confidence with the system in India because there were many times I've heard, people say that the complaint was never taken. And sometimes most of the time, not sometimes, when you complain and then you don't have protection after
Mm.
your abuser, they can come to you and they can do anything. And then what are you
Wow.
going to do? What are you going to say?
Oh
I'm
my
not going to
goodness.
have a cop standing next to me 24/7. That
Right.
So it's a difficult situation to be in. There are laws that have changed now, Natalie, but I think that at that time, this I'm talking a decade and a half earlier, those times were different.
Mm.
Now it's still there, it's still rampant. And I should tell you that I filed a complaint recently, a couple of years back, and the complaint was not taken for a long
Mm.
time. And I had to really push to get that complaint registered. So, yes, it's the reality, unfortunately, today for women. I cannot, as a woman, go into a cop station and register a complaint easily.
Wow. Wow. So in the meantime, in this terrible situation, you decided to learn French. at the Alliance Française de Bangalore, kind of a French, not embassy, but school that teaches French, if I understand correctly. What gave you that idea? Were you just drawn to learn something, or was it French in particular?
I actually wanted to learn German. That was my
Ah,
goal, especially
okay.
because my aunt and uncle they live in Germany, and my aunt doesn't speak English. So I said, in order to keep away from the postnatal depression that I was getting into, I told myself I have to keep myself occupied doing something that's, gives reason to live, to survive this situation that I was in.
Hmm.
And I, but the German school was really far away. I I had to drive for an hour, almost in Bangalore traffic, and the traffic is terrible. So Allianz was not too far away. It was about 10-15 minutes away from our house. So I would drive. We were not living with our in-laws. We had moved out to a house opposite to an apartment opposite to my in-laws' house. But still, I was always fearful that I would be watched or I would be asked where you're going. I always would tell my nanny. I had a nanny at the time. So in the afternoons, I would put my daughter to bed and I would tell the nanny I'm going to the market, take care of her. So that really helped me, and it opened a window into a different world. So there was always fear, and yeah, somehow I finished B1 level, and they did come to know after. But I was already in a good level where I could speak good French.
Wow. Good for you. My goodness. And you said that through the French language you became completely immersed in French culture. What specific aspects of French culture really drew you to it?
I think the very fact that it was almost like finding freedom, the liberté that the French call. Um, it's almost like finding France in India at the Alliance. People are
Huh.
liberal, nobody is judging you. You can have a nice conversation with anybody in the campus. We are all there to learn. It was a window into a different world. We were learning about museums, art, we were learning about cinema, were learning about music, and the films gave me an insight into the real French culture. We were learning about wine, the boulangeries, and all of that. So I was seeing that in cinema. So somewhere it was a window into a different world, and I loved it so much. It was an escape for me.
Lovely. Now, although your family forbade you to work, they did allow you to study. So you positioned a job with a French tech firm looking to outsource work to India as another training or learning experience. But the hiring manager said you need to train in Paris for a month. And you write, I felt like I just choked on something. So walk us through now. You've got this opportunity, but given the situation, what did you think? What did you feel? How did you handle that?
W- I sent out the resume, and I was thinking I would get a job as a teacher in a school.
Uh-huh.
I was expecting jobs like that. And when this IT company reached out to me, I was shocked. I was like, they're never going to hire me. Why would you think somebody without any kind of experience, somebody who just knows, a little bit of French, and I never thought that they're going to hire me. But I still put on my old dress. I went for the interview, and I sat there really in my head thinking this is never going to happen. And they loved my fluency in French, and they told me that they could. What shocked me was they told me that they could train me into engineering, into coding and things like that, but they couldn't train an engineer to learn French.
Hmm.
I was at an advantage without even knowing it. And
Hmm.
the icing on the cake that afternoon was them telling me that, you need to go to Paris and train. And then I had this mixed emotions within me. I wanted to, I felt so much joy. I, but I felt so much sorrow too, because I knew that, I may not be able to go given that
Right.
situation that I was in, given the marriage. And I really, really wanted to go. But I looked at them and I said, I'll come back to you with an answer soon. And I headed back home. On the way, I called one of my best friends, and Susan said, you have to try, you have to go, do whatever it takes. You got this, girl, go for it. And I think, yeah, that really changed a lot of, she was very inspirational with that.
So what did you say to your husband when you got home? How did you convince him?
Oh, when I got home, of course, I picked up my daughter from the golf course and went back home, and he had his friend over, and he was sitting there in the balcony on the canopy, and having a couple of drinks. And luckily that day, his friend's wife had got a promotion, and I just jumped in. I said, "Hey, I've got this wonderful job." And I remember feeling humiliated because both my husband and his friend laughed at me, and
Oh.
they really laughed at me, and they said, somebody's giving you a job, and somebody is going to pay your tickets, and somebody is going to fly you to Paris and pay you to do a job. And I felt terrible that they thought of me like that. I knew my husband would think of me like that, but I think that had also reflected on the friends. And in my head, I said, okay, I need this job more than ever.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So I had to really, really convince them to let me go.
Was there anything you said that was the turning point, or was it just he was in a good mood because his friend was talking about his wife, or was there something you said?
Well, no, it never happened that day. He never agreed for anything that day, but it went on for a few weeks, and then yes, he did sign the papers, because the travel agent, she sent me the papers to sign, and and I had to beg, plead, dance, do everything.
Wow. Oh my gosh. My goodness. So you arrive in Paris. Wow. And describe your first glimpse of the Eiffel Tower.
Oh gosh, this is one of the most beautiful moments of my life, because you read about Eiffel Tower in your textbooks, you look at pictures on your computer or on television, but you never really think about the magnitude of that beautiful tower that's sitting in the middle of Paris. It's just a gorgeous sight. And it was after a couple of days, when I reached Paris, I went to see the Eiffel Tower, and I was blown away, blown away. It was like falling in love with metal.
I love that. You fell in love with it. It is ginormous, isn't it? I mean, if you're standing up close too, it's just so huge. And yet at a distance, it's also so magnificent and so majestic. Yeah. Wow. That was really a great high for you. And tell us about your first meal in Paris.
Oh, this was in a creperie. This was at a creperie I think around Montparnasse, the area Montparnasse. And I had ordered this galette, which is a savory version of a crepe. And they had mushrooms in it. And it was one of the best meals that I had. I wasn't cooking it, but, I was it was a different cuisine. I had read about this in books, and it was so exciting to have something like that in Paris.
Must have tasted like freedom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now there's a pivotal chapter called The Revelation where you decide to leave India permanently because you had a great experience in Paris. But what was the exact moment that made you believe that you had to leave the country and not return, not just leave temporarily for like some training?
Well,
Was there a moment?
I think, Natalie, I was never inclined to leave. I wanted to leave permanently.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that was in 2015 and 16 is when I really wanted to leave. After my marriage had broken apart, I really wanted to leave. But, as everybody, you need a visa. And I wished I had, a permanent visa, but that was not the case. So I always thought this is going to be temporary for a couple of years, and then we'll figure out. But I kind of said to myself, I'm going to try my best to get to where to France and to do a course in wine. My sister, I remember we sitting at I remember sitting with my sister and she telling me, look up any courses that you like and do something else with your life. And I chose France because I could speak the language.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And so you decide to return to France under the guise of more training. You enroll in the wine MBA program in Bordeaux at INSEAD Business School. How did you tell your daughter, Shloka, who was 9 years old at the time, that you were leaving her behind in India?
It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking because she was 9. Her whole world
Mm,
had come apart. We had moved from our house and we had moved to my parents' house. She had lost her bed, her toys. She had lost her whole environment that she lived in.
mm.
And suddenly, and I was her safe space. And
Oh,
suddenly I was leaving.
yeah. Wow.
And for her, it was heartbreaking. And for me, it was heartbreaking too. But she was very mature. She understood. And my mother had stepped in.
Mm,
And my mother really took care of her when she was in India. So I knew I could leave her with my mother. So it
mhm.
somehow worked out. My mother was a bridge between me and her,
Oh,
me and
that's great.
Shloka. And yeah, she took care of not only my daughter, she took care of my dog, Casper.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, she is wonderful. She's a wonderful human being. And my father stepped in too, and he he said, I'll guard her. I'll give her securities. Don't worry. So I had family, my sister and my brother-in-law. They said they will take care. So my whole family had stepped in, come together.
Mm,
So I was not as worried as anybody else. The only worry was, what if Shloka falls sick and she needs me and I'm
mhm.
5,000 miles away and I cannot,
Right.
just drive down. I cannot fly down in an hour's time. So the distance really mattered, but I think my mom managed everything really well.
That's a great mother.
She is.
And yeah, how did you manage I mean, you said you spoke to Shloka every day by phone, was it? Or weekly?
I did speak to her time and again. Sometimes
Uh-huh.
it was hard because we had a time difference, and she would be in
Right.
school, and I would be in school, and things like that. But I think our bond was so strong as a mother and
Right.
daughter that it didn't feel like, disconnected. We still chatted. Still told me, she's a chatty girl. She's always a chatty girl, even now. She told me about her experiences, her school experiences, what was happening in her school, her birthday, her Casper, our dog, and she told me everything on phone call. So I was still very involved in her life. I was there when, to fix the meetings. with the golf coaches. I was there to make sure that, if she had to be picked up and dropped somewhere, I'd make sure friends would organize that. And I was still involved even from far away. So, and I have a huge set of friends back in India, and they've been great help too. They're my family.
I bet. Yeah, absolutely. So you chose Bordeaux because, quote, as an Indian, I hadn't heard of Burgundy or the Rhone, but Bordeaux was the crown, the king of wines. What were your first impressions of Bordeaux when you arrived?
So when I was on the flight and the flight was descending, I peeped out of the airplane to see this silver river that was flowing down beneath.
The
And
Gironde?
yes, the Gironde. And
Yeah.
I was so excited when I saw that. I felt that finally I'm here. Finally, there's freedom. And I think when I really got into the car and the visa was stamped, because as everybody, you're always wondering, when you get here and the immigration officer, he looks at you in that very serious face and says, rejects your visa or whatever. You never know. So you're always anxious. But yeah, I had, once he stamped, and I took the taxi to my Airbnb, and I was exhausted, of course. But yeah, it set in after. Those are the memories. And going around Bordeaux and visiting, I think the next day I went around with my Airbnb host. He was kind enough to take me around Bordeaux, showing me the river, showing me the beautiful buildings, the cafes. So yeah, that's still very memorable for me.
Yeah, and you even write about the mascarons, or the frightening masks that are carved in stone buildings of Bordeaux. What do they look like, and why are they there?
Oh, they're gorgeous. So they date back to the 18th century, and they're there. They were actually carved into stone buildings just about the door.
Well, there you have it.
To ward
I hope
off
you enjoyed
evil.
our chat with me.
But
Here are my takeaways.
I think some point
Number
of
one,
time it just
how can a
became
wine
a
story
symbol of
rooted in
status.
darkness
The
leave you
richer
feeling
they were,
hopeful
the
about
more
life?
beautiful the
As Nam explains, lots of people
masks,
have written
the
stories about
mascaron looked
survival
like.
and grief, and others of vineyards. Okay. And hers is kind of a combo deal of all these stories. There's darkness, there's light, there's highs and lows. It's the eat, pray, love of wine, a from-scratch story, and it's all put together. She hopes it will give people who feel that they cannot go further some hope, as they can follow her story. And when she didn't feel she could go further, she kept going and discovered a new beautiful life. I agree with her. Number two, why is France such a symbol of freedom, possibility, and reinvention? Nam says she was on the flight. I love this. And as the plane was descending, she looked out the airplane window and saw that silver snake-like river, the Gironde, that splits the right and left banks of Bordeaux. And then when she touched down, she thought, finally, I'm here. It's freedom. And the next day she went around with her Airbnb host, and he showed her the river and the beautiful stone buildings and their carvings and the cafes. Made a big impact on her. And finally, how can discovering France through art, cinema, and wine become an escape into a completely different world, and for her, a new life? Nam said it was like finding la liberté. The French call that freedom, la liberté, liberty. It's what she also found at Alliance Française in India when she was studying French. No one was judging. She could converse with people. They were all keen to learn. It was a window into a new world. And they talked about museums and art and cinema and French culture, all of it. And that really was an escape, a survival tactic for her. If you missed episode 332, go back and take a listen. I chat about starting a Bordeaux winery and making a midlife move with Sally Evans. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
Fronsac has an interesting history in that it was very well known in the past, in that it had the first wines that were produced that went up to the royal court of Versailles, to the French royalty, mainly thanks to the fact that Cardinal Richelieu was also the Duke of Fronsac. Also in history, Charlemagne had a folly here. So that was great. But then as time went by, an area like Saint-Emilion, which became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, really overtook Fronsac in terms of notoriety. We have very similar soil. And I think that Fronsac fell behind at that time. When climate was a little bit cooler as well, some of the wines tended to be a little bit more rustic, maybe not quite as ripe or as elegant as they could be. And so it kind of fell behind in terms of notoriety.
You won't want to miss next week when we continue our chat with Nam. If you liked this episode or learned even one thing from it, please email or tell a friend about the podcast this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in learning more about how someone turned their life around in the wine industry. It's easy to find the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. Just tell them to search for that title or my name, Natalie MacLean Wine, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, their favorite podcast app, or they can listen on my site, nataliemaclean.com/podcast. Email me if you have a sip tip question or would like to win one of 3 copies of the books I have to give away. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, or if you're reading my book. In the show notes, you'll find a link to take a free online food and wine pairing class with me called the 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes that can ruin your dinner and how to fix them forever at nataliemaclean.com/class. And that is all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/372. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a wine that inspires you to look at the world differently. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.